The plants give us hope. They give us beauty, joy, perseverance. They really fill our spiritual need in so many ways.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. First up is the Herbs with Rosalee Student Spotlight. Each week we take a moment to celebrate one of our amazing students and their inspiring contributions to our herbal community. This week we're shining the spotlight on Susan Critton from California. Susan has taken every single course we offer here at the Herbs with Rosalee School, and that's no small feat. Just last year alone, she dove headfirst into Rooted Medicine Circle, the Herbal Energetics course, and Cooling Inflammation. Despite the overlapping course schedules, Susan showed up with unwavering enthusiasm. She attended live sessions, asked insightful questions, and brought such vibrant energy to every class. Her dedication and curiosity have been an inspiration to the entire community. And the adventure doesn't stop there. Susan will be joining me this summer in Ireland for an unforgettable herbal journey with Wild Routes Ireland. I can't wait to explore the wild plants and ancient landscapes together. To honor her contributions, Mountain Rose Herbs is sending Susan a $50 gift certificate to stock up on their incredible selection of sustainably sourced herbal supplies. Mountain Rose Herbs is my go-to for high-quality organic spices, herbal remedies, and even hard-to-find botanicals. They ship all over the U.S. and have a massive selection of products to fuel your herbal adventures. Thank you, Mountain Rose Herbs, for supporting our amazing students. If you'd like to explore Mountain Rose Herbs' offering and support this show, you can find the special link in the show notes. Hey friends, it's Rosalee. If you've been nourished by this podcast, if it's helped you feel more connected to the plants or more grounded in your own herbal path, then I'd love to invite you to join the Herbs with Rosalee podcast circle. This special membership helps make the podcast possible. It supports everything we do behind the scenes, and it gives you a chance to go even deeper with the content that you love. Inside the circle, you'll get exclusive herbal resources, live classes each season with some of my favorite herbal teachers, and a private space to connect with fellow plant lovers. It's where the heart of our herbal community continues to grow. To learn more and join us, visit herbalpodcastcircle.com. Your support means the world, and it helps this podcast continue to bloom. The morning I woke up to record this interview with Rosemary, I just had one of those pinch me moments. I just couldn't believe that this is my life, because every moment I get to spend with Rosemary just feels like a true gift. She brings so much presence, joy, and beauty to the world, and she's poured this incredible amount of love into the herbal community over the years. I will admit I was a bit nervous for this interview, not because of Rosemary herself, of course, but because I knew we weren't going to follow my usual simple format, so I was going to need to stretch my interview muscles just a bit. And I have to admit, I did have one pretty major goof up, and I will try to make up for that in the herbal tidbit at the end, so be sure to stick around for that. This conversation is full of spirit, warmth, and so much Rosemary wisdom. I can't wait for you to hear it. Rosemary Gladstar has been practicing, living, learning, teaching, and writing about herbs for over 45 years. She's the author of 12 books, including her latest book, The Generosity of Plants. She's also the author and director of the popular home study course, The Science and Art of Herbalism. In 2018, Rosemary was awarded an honorary doctorate for her life work from the National University of Naturopathic Medicine. Rosemary is the co-founder and former director of both the International Herb Symposium and the New England Women's Herbal Conference, the founding president of United Plant Savers, and the co-founder and original formulator of traditional medicinal teas. You can find more from Rosemary at her website, www.scienceandartofherbalism.com.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Welcome, Rosemary. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my delight, Rosalee.
Oh, my delight. Oh my gosh, I've been anticipating this since we set it up. And yeah, we're doing this in early spring. I'm wondering, are you seeing any signs of spring where you're at?
Well, there's the longer days, there's the returning birds. We actually saw blue heron flying over the lake, but we had a major snowfall yesterday with 8 inches. So there
8
was
inches.
Yeah, 8 inches. Yeah,
Right.
it's big soft snow, so it won't last, and it's pretty typical March in Vermont. But people are always talking about all the blossoms and young fresh greens coming up, and I'm laughing, going, well, we have a few brave daffodils and tulips, but they just got beaten down by the snow.
Oh, yeah.
So we're dreaming still. We're in the dream state.
I feel you. It's like that here too. I'm also very north, so I still have snow on the ground. But as soon as the snow melts here, the wildflowers come. So I'm kind of getting those first glimpses of flowers, which is lovely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we know it's right behind. I mean, that's the thing. When spring does come, it's already in our hearts, by the way. The light, the weather's changing, just the return of the birds, and you can feel everything under the earth just ready to burst forward. So when it comes, it's riotous here, so yeah.
That's nice. You got some moisture before the riot begins. Everybody will love that. All the green growth.
Yeah.
Well, Rosemary, I love that you're publishing a book this spring because I think spring is the best time to publish herbal books. It just feels so right on so many levels, just that like birthing of something new and just, yeah, it just has all of the feels of the spring vibe. So the generosity of plants. I've got this a few weeks ago. I've read it cover to cover. And then I've also just been like picking it up and reading it, here and there. It's a really versatile book in that way, in that it's a cover to cover, plus it's a fun one. And it's a really fun one to share too with folks. It's not something I wanted to keep to myself. So I've been taking photos of my favorite quotes, sending them to friends and talking about it. And so, yeah, it's a book that's just been hitting me in all the wonderful ways. And it really feels like this, like a garden of wisdom. So you've collected these quotes, they're grounding, they're nourishing, and so many of them are full of heart. And I'd love to hear from you just how this book came about. What was the inspiration and how are we gifted this beautiful treasure?
Thanks, Rosalee. Yeah, well, this book was the funnest one that I've ever written. It's because it's not a book of information, not more recipes and remedies for whatever you have ailing, but it's a book of inspiration. And I didn't really write it. I was a collector and the gatherer, which I'm very good at collecting and gathering. So I've always been a lover of quotes and plant musings. I think way back, I remember I have some that I collected like 50 years ago, right? It's still in my files. I just feel like, these really simple, like maybe 2 or 3 line statements can take you on such a deep journey or give you a fresh new view, or so much can be said with such a few amount of words. I'm such a wordy person. That's probably why I love it so much. And I oftentimes use these quotes like, on calendars that I wrote, or on the schedules of our conferences and the schedules of our school programs. But I had so many of them. So the question was, are they just going to leave with me? What am I going to do with them? So the idea of putting them into a collection was something that I discussed with my beloved friend and publisher, Deborah Balmuth at Story. And she was 100% behind the idea. So it was a really fun project. I feel it was a group project, both of many herbalists that I know, and then the people at Story. It was just a great project to work on.
And it came together so beautifully. I love that it's hardback. Like it's like just a really beautiful book. And then the photography inside is so stunning. I like what you said about how like just a few lines can take you on a journey. One of the first quotes in the book is by Stephen Herod Buhner. And he writes, "Once your life has been saved by a plant, nothing is ever the same again." And I read that as, one of the first quotes
I read it and it just hit me so hard, right in my heart. It's
Yeah.
just, this is truth right here. And
Yeah.
I feel like he just summed up my whole life in that one sentence. It's very powerful. And that was like one of the first quotes. And there's a whole book of them. Like you said, I mean, it just can change your worldview. You recognize truth. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah. Also, they can challenge you too, and that was one of the things, like I like to be challenged. I like to talk with people who have very different worldviews than I do, because it helps me see the world differently, or it helps expand my view. And so, there was also, there's also quotes in there that I know will be questionable for people. They might read them and have really their own unusual thoughts about it, or something entirely different, which I want it to have happen, right? I think that's how we learn, and how we expand and how we become more of who we are, is by being able to respectfully listen to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, these are great conversation starters too. That's the thing. Like, I didn't want to keep the quotes just to myself, as I was saying. I was,
Oh,
taking photos, sending them to friends. You want to share these and kind of enliven the discussion. I'm curious, were there any quotes that, I'm sure there's many actually, but is there something that jumps out at you as like a quote that maybe it was a new quote, or just something that kind of grabbed your heart that's on your mind right now?
yeah, well, so when I realized that I was going to actually start to put all of these quotes into a collection, I started going back through a lot of the old letters, because I'm a letter saver. I have piles and piles of letters. I even save emails. I have this special folder on my computer that's letters. I just, emails that people send me that are so beautiful. I can't delete them. It's just, they're so heartful. So I went back through a lot of those, and I found a quote by Jim McDonald, actually, that he sent it out a couple times around Thanksgiving. It's his Thanksgiving message to his friend. And I really loved this quote a lot. Let me see if I can find it here. I think I have it here. It's on page 203. And this is by Jim McDonald. Herbalists exist because their communities come to them in need. Herbalists exist because their communities support them. Herbalists learn more because their communities ask them questions and share their own experiences and wisdoms. Herbalists exist as a part of an ecosystem made up not just, or even mostly, of plants, but of the connections between plants and place and people. That was a really powerful one. And then I also found a number of quotes in letters that my dear friend Cascade Anderson Geller had sent me over the years. Cascade was, I think over Rosalee, and had the opportunity to study with her. She was a very close friend of mine, and of many hundreds of people, and also really one of the outstanding herbalists of our time. She passed away just a few years ago, I think about a decade ago. And I am so fortunate because I've saved all of her letters. I have a big file of her letters. So this was from one of her letters. I was asking a shaman why he used an herb the way he did, and he said it was because that was what the herb told him to do. He asked me if I was an herbalist and how I got my information. And I told him it was through a variety of ways. He responded, the only way to get the information was to ask the plant. That's a very shamanic answer, right?
That is, yeah. I love that Cascade got that too. Just, I don't know, just with her fiery spirit, and I can just imagine that exchange. Yeah, it's lovely. So you've collected these quotes, and I love, like you said, some of them are so full of heart, some of them might be challenging. It really feels like this is a love letter, not just to the generosity of the plants and the plants themselves, but to all of us in the herbal community. And I'm curious, what do you hope that the herbal community gets from opening this book and reading these words? Like, what's your highest dreams for this?
Well, yeah, I'm hoping that, I think right now it is like a love letter, I have to say. And it's not necessarily a love letter just for me, but from the plants, speaking through the voice of the herbalists who love them and care for them and steward them. And I'm thinking that when I was writing it, I was thinking about this, how the world is so rough right now. It's just challenging, no matter what your belief system is, it's just a challenging time. And it seems to be that way for most people, wherever you're traveling right now, there's just a lot of uncertainty, I think, in the universe and the planets and the stars, the way they're all shifting around in our political scenes, and then sometimes we can even say in the herbal communities, we see that happening. And so I'm just hoping that this will be a softening, an opportunity to just listen to the plants and listen to these people. A lot of them are modern herbalists, but some of them are from centuries ago, Some of them are from centuries still to come, voices that are still looking to find a place to be. But they're all saying the same thing, basically the plants give us hope, they give us beauty, joy, perseverance. They really fill our spiritual need in so many ways, no matter who you believe in, whether it's God or the goddess or great spirit or nothing. Those plants come right in and they just feel that need for connection and spirit. And so I'm hoping that through this simple book, these simple quotes, that people can just find that loveliness, that helps to bring joy and softness and a sense of hope, really. And, the artwork too, I'm glad that you mentioned it because it's all original. It was all done for the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's no
Wow.
stock photos in it. It was all created for the book by different artists. They have
Wow.
a beautiful,
I have to admit, Rosemary, I thought it was like, I was like, wow, I've never seen stock images this good. But I just assumed it was because there's so much of it.
No, it was
wow, that's really amazing that there's so much original in here. Oh, I'm so glad you told me that.
Yeah. Carolyn Eckhart, who was the art director at Story, she really, like I said, it was a community effort. So Deborah, my publisher, she was retiring and this was her last project, right?
Oh,
so She was completely committed and dedicated. She really wanted to do this book before she retired. And then Carolyn Eckhart, the graphic artist there, she just put her heart and soul into it. So you can see, there's just a lot of love and care. And that's what I want to flow out to people, Life is so delicious.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense now.
Yeah, it's pretty special.
Yeah, I didn't know I could love the book more, but now I want to look at it all over again because I really just thought it just didn't occur to me it could be all original because there's just the breadth of it and just how much there is. But I really thought, I was like, wow, I've never seen stock images like this. Like everything just like there is heart in the images. I mean, even the images you want to just spend time with. And that's really wonderful.
Those little plant, there's like little plant personalities throughout the book, and then, so I don't know who the artist was. It might have been Carolyn herself, the graphic artist. They took photos of each of the plants and then all of the little dyes behind the plant, those are the plant dyes that they put on paper. So it's actually the plant dyes from the plant. So when you see violet and you see all those shades of violet, that's the violet.
Oh my gosh. Wow, this is an artistic book beyond that I was even realizing. Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. I love what you said about, that people read it and feel like the softening, the joy, the beauty. That's absolutely what I felt. And it was such a joy to read, which is, again, it was so easy I didn't read it in one sitting because it's not something you really, I wouldn't want to read it in one sitting. You want to soak it in, and feel the quotes and think about them. But I did read it cover to cover and then I felt like that wasn't enough. And so I had to keep coming back to it and reading it again. And so, yeah, it's just been a really beautiful experience all in all. And now I'm just so thrilled to hear about the art as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, something you've been touching on that I wanted to read actually from the introduction, just a few lines here. You write, in my life's work advocating for the value of herbalism and the importance of generously sharing the knowledge and wisdom of the plants, I've always believed that it's valuable to hear different viewpoints and to be challenged sometimes by people we don't agree with. The fullness and rich diversity of our herbal community and our advocacy on behalf of the plants and nature depends not only on those places where we meet on common ground, but also on our ability to respect differences and kindly dialogue about them. So you touched on this a little bit before and how some things might be challenging. And I don't know, when I read those lines, I just feel like those are some of the biggest issues facing our herbal community right now. And so I would love to hear from you about that. Some things that come to mind are we have this tendency now to kind of split into smaller and smaller groups that we're seeing that happen, or we've had some instances where herbalists have kind of turned against each other in kind of a
Oh, yeah.
publicly vitriolic way. We've lost
That's-
some civility and dialogue, and I would love to hear from you, Rosemary, about these issues and the kind of the challenges that we're facing in the herbal community, and if you could solve them all in the next 10 minutes, that would be great.
I can. We
Wonderful.
just need to all come together in my backyard and hold hands and sing. And
All right, let's do it.
I think that's kind of, I think when in the 1970s, when herbalism was just coming up from underground again, and I always like to say there were definitely people, there were elders, and there were definitely indigenous cultures, and there was ethnic communities still practicing herbalism, but the scene of herbalism was entirely different at that time. There were small pockets of mostly young hippies that were using plants, and it was not something that anybody aspired to be. You told somebody that you were an herbalist, they almost always turned away, to find somebody who was more interested than you and a little more sane to talk to. So we're seeing it's entirely different. But one of the brilliant things that happened back in the 70s is that these young herbalists came together and stood in circle and sang and held hands and learned together. And we had very different ideas and different personalities and big egos, all of that was, that's human. We're all there as human beings. But I think because we started together from the same place and we shared together and we learned from one another, we were able to respect the differences. And another thing that I think was really important is I think none of us expected another one of us to be perfect. There wasn't this idea that your teachers, like the elders that we had the great good fortune to study were definitely not perfect. They were not saints, They were personalities and characters. And they made their way in the world because they were such individuals and not always agreeable, right? But we weren't expecting each other to be perfect. We were learning from one another. We'd recognize each other's fallibilities and we'd grow from that. What we had, I think that's missing is we met in person and we were much more respectful. And as I said, it was important to us to create community. Of course, with the enormous amount of people interested in herbalism now, we don't have one circle anymore. We have multi-circles, which are interlocking. They're still all supportive of each other. I remember something that Michael Tierra actually, who himself is a very challenging personality, right? He's contributed so much to American herbalism. He pretty much founded the American Herbalist Guild, to be quite honest. He advocated for that and advocated back in the 1970s, right? When we were all just starting to come together as young people. And I remember he saying that, so long as we stand together with all of our differences, we'll be strong. But when we start to splinter, we'll fall apart. And I think I think it's especially potent coming from Michael because he was a challenging personality. He raises issues and he gets people's hair standing up. And I also want to say that he's also hugely respected in the herbal community for his work, his writings, his teachings, the incredible gifts he's given to the herbal community. See, right there, we have somebody that's challenging but incredibly held. I don't know why people can't do that anymore. I think it's almost this need, like people put people up on pedestals and then they do it just to knock them down. It's almost like this. Yeah. And of course we know that a big part of the disrespect and this, what you were saying, like the horrible ways that people talk to each other is because of the internet. They're not in person anymore. Like they forget there's a real human being with a sensitive heart and they're fallible because there's no human being walking on this planet that isn't, meaning they're sensitive. There's a sensitive human being on the other end. And so they forget how to talk respectfully to each other. So, and again, I'm not talking about, sweet talk, la, la, la. I'm talking about honest, respectful communication where you're actually trying to dialogue. And we see that having fallen down not only in a small way modeled in our herbal community, but in a much greater way modeled in the country that we live in. It's very sad to see the way that, we're all struggling to find a way to communicate our differences to one another without respectfully listening. So, yeah. So Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'm talking around in circles, but did you get anything out of that?
I got so much out of that, actually. Thank you so much. I feel like I even want to just go watch it over again when I can to let it all sink in. I feel like I should add that Michael Tier was one of my first teachers. I graduated from his 4-year program, and so he
Yeah.
has had a huge influence on my life. And I definitely wouldn't be the
Yeah.
herbalist I am today without him. I actually first started teaching Taste of Herbs, which is something I'm most well known for. I actually started those teachings with Michael. We did webinars
Oh, that's
together back
awesome.
in like 2010 or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
a great friend of mine, and I didn't mean anything disrespectfully. I'm
Mhm,
actually kind of holding him up, but just saying that, you know, well, for any of the listeners, they'll know that the American Herbalist Guild actually kind of forced him out of the guild because he held a different opinion
mhm,
about something that I have to say I agreed with him 100% with. He
mhm,
had the fortitude to speak up when he believed he was speaking for somebody that was being vilified, and he spoke up and
mhm,
shared his point of view, and again, disrespectful listening to him, to
mhm,
an elder, no less.
mhm. Yeah, that incident made me very sad, actually, and
Made
I
me
stopped being
pissed.
involved with the AHG after that myself. So just now starting to mend the fences on that one, but that was
Yeah.
a tough time. Yeah. Well, the respectful listening really sticks with me. This idea that we just cannot seek perfection in people and hold people to perfection standards. I think that that in itself is really important. I like how you said too, it's not about being like sweet la 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 or glossing over problems, but just about being real. And I
Well,
think
realizing, especially most people who are studying healing or studying herbalism are studying healing, right? How to be a healer on this planet to people and to animals and to everything. It's really about healing. And so when you're healing, when you're working as a healing, you're working with people who are ill or sick oftentimes, or people who have big personality problems. So there should be tremendous compassion for that,
mm,
not this
mhm,
incredible like a witch hunting kind of that goes on, or
mhm,
people jumping on the bandwagon to vilify others, rather
mhm,
than trying to understand what the problem is and what we can do to solve it.
mhm,
So sometimes it does take really strong medicine to do that. But when we administer strong medicine, like as herbalists and healers, we administer it with kindness and love, not with hate and anger, right?
mm,
So I think about that, and I remember one of my elders, I read this somewhere, one of my elders so long ago said, God chooses imperfect beings to carry his work on because there's no perfect beings. And I remember hearing that when I was younger and, not expecting that from my teachers. I had a responsibility when I sat in circles to listen to a teacher. And that was to discern the information coming at me, to take in what I wanted and to leave out what I didn't. That was my responsibility. So anyway,
I really like that perspective. And I'm kind of curious because you've mentioned some of your elders that you had the honor of studying with. I'm wondering if you would tell us about someone and maybe a story. I don't know, about Adele or
oh,
Norma or yeah, I don't know.
yeah. So, well, I had the very good fortune to study with some amazing teachers. And I used to think like, oh, it's so sad because all these elders have passed. And now I realize, well, all the young people are studying with us, right? We're the elders. Because my elders were like younger than I am now when I studied with them. But some who had really important, really just were important mentors for me was Juliet de Berkeley-Levy. I'm
Mm,
so incredibly fortunate. I actually discovered her writings when I was in my late teens and wrote to her for probably 10 or 15 years before I actually had the opportunity to meet her. And so I want to say about all of the elders, they were amazing characters, right? If you were to say one word that defined them, they were characters. They were very much who they were. And they didn't really care about being anybody else. If they had cared, it was long ago. By the time I met them, they were very who they were. And so Juliet was just such an incredible person. She was an amazing herbalist, storyteller, writer. She had this, just amazing life story that I always say everybody who's interested in herbs has to see her movie, Juliet of the Herbs, because it's just such a beautiful film depicting, you know, a woman who was rare actually in her age for certain, and even in our times. And then Norma Myers was another one of my early teachers. Actually, I was thinking about Norma recently, but yeah, a lot of the herbalists, Michael Tierra also, by the way, a lot of the herbalists of my age pilgrimage to her place. She lived on a reservation on the northernmost tip. It was an island on the northernmost tip of Vancouver Island. So to get to her house, you had to travel by plane, train, taxi, and boat.
Wow.
You had to make an effort to get there because it was just such a travel to get there. But once you got there, she would invite you into her home, and you'd stay in this little tiny house with bunches of other students and her dear fisherman husband, who kind of would step over the sleeping bodies to go to his fishing boat in the morning. She was just a wild woman, actually, and took in everybody. She was such a healer and such a model. But again, if people were looking for some great perfect healer, she was a character, and she was a really great healer in every way. Yeah. Did you know any of these people, Rosalee?
No, I did not.
A little bit before your time. Yeah. And
Dr. I know them through your stories and through Michael's stories, and that's how they've lived on.
Yeah. So many incredible stories of these elders. Most of the people my generation, we would travel to these elders to learn from them because, they were our teachers at that time. We didn't have schools, and we didn't have classes and online courses by any means. So we would make those efforts, and we met a lot of each other there. I'll tell you, a number of stories come into my head about Norma, but I would then invite these elders to come to teach at herb school, because by that time, I think in the late 1970s, I had started the California School of Herbal Studies, and I really wanted my students to meet her. So, in those times, almost all the students were young hippies with long hair, and they all had the proper, beautiful, colorful dresses on, and everybody knew how to use the pendulums. We were all very proper in our New Age knowledge, anyway. So Norma is not New Age at all. Norma is rough, and just heartful. And anyway, she's going to come in and she's going to teach my students how to douse for their herbal remedies. And I could see my students kind of like, they weren't maybe really thinking this, but I imagine them all going, oh, we know how to douse. What is she going to teach us? So Norma takes a dripping tea bag out of somebody's cup. Literally, honestly, she's not trying to be funny, but she's looking for something to douse with. So there was a dripping tea bag. So she takes that tea bag and she's dousing away, seeing if this is the right herb for that person. And the tea bag comes off the string and splatters against the wall. And without missing a beat, Norma gets up and runs into the kitchen and comes out with the kitchen stopper, the little plug on the end of a chain, and continues to do her dowsing.
Oh, I love that. Oh man.
Well, that's only one story. That's one of the ones that I could really tell on a podcast. But yeah, she was an amazing teacher.
What were what were people's faces like? Were they just into it? Were they like, okay, or this is like?
I think by that time they had gotten that Norma was genuine and real, and that they were sitting at the foot of a master. It was rare. And, but their first thoughts, I'm sure, was, here's this really kind of rough dressed woman. She had missing front teeth. And that's because whenever she earned money, she didn't take care of herself. She took care of other people. She didn't really, like, I think about how vain I would be. I would immediately take all that thousands of dollars and get my teeth fixed. But she was more concerned with helping other people than she was with her teeth. And so, she had a lot of teachings. I think by the time the tea bags were spewing around the room and that she came out with the stopper, they had gotten it.
They were mesmerized. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that story. I hadn't heard that before. And just, to continue on this path, I really love your podcast, Voices of Our Elders, where you've been interviewing your friends and just hearing their wisdom. And I'm wondering if, reflecting, I know you've done quite a few episodes now, and reflecting on those episodes, I'm curious if there's any takeaways for you of, what these wizened herbalists might have to share, especially now in these times of kind of deep cultural and kind of generational shifts that are going on.
Yeah, the reason that I started those elder podcasts, I mean, first of all, they're fun for me. I'm talking with friends I've known for 50 years, right? But it was because so many of my friends are of that age where they're passing on, it's their They passed on their wisdom, their teachings, they've done their work, and now they're making their journey into the spirit worlds. And I would just see that happening, and I wanted to capture these stories and archive them. It's not like they haven't written them, it's not like they haven't done a lot of interviews and stuff, but I wanted to put them all together into a collection, and so that they're available for people in future generations, because that group of herbalists that are in their 70s and 80s now, they were kind of at the forefront of this herbal renaissance. They were the people who started teaching. They were the people who started actually going back to the plants and learning from the plants, who sought out the elders, who started those first early companies and wrote some of those early books that so many of future generations have relied on. So it's been a really, really great mission. And the takeaway for me, I would say, aside from just having so much fun doing it, and I'm always learning, like, as I said, I've known most of these people for a long time, but, I haven't heard their stories fully, or if I did hear them, I forgot them. So it's fun for me to hear them again. But I think the takeaway for me is just how time softens us, like, it kind of beats the hard edges out, or those places where we're so certain about things, like we're so certain that life should be this way or that way, or it just, after you've experienced life, it's over the many years, you just get softened, it's almost like you're kind of in the mortar and pestle, or the rock tumbler, as we say, and you keep getting tumbled and polished and tumbled and polished by life's lessons. So for all of us, I think there's this bit of softening and an acceptance, and also, I would say, a tremendous feeling of reward that all of us have, that we got to be engaged in something that's been so positive and powerful for the earth, that we actually said yes to a calling that wasn't a calling at that time. We said yes, not knowing what we were even saying yes to, and that the rewards have been so profound on a personal level, and oftentimes on a greater pathway as well. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. It makes me think of something like, I often look at your life and I'm just amazed at all that you've done, from the schools you've started, organizations you've started, businesses you've started. And then I think it's honestly not an exaggeration that you have probably inspired millions of people. You're
Maybe a little bit exaggeration.
I don't think so. I don't think so. You think of all of the people you've influenced and inspired, who then like gone on to influence and inspire. And so it's just this beautiful ripple. And the other day, I'm in your course, Science and Art of Herbalism, and you're doing this live teachings right now. And you had a live class on formulation. And I love how you set up that class. You said formulation isn't just for plants, it's for people too.
Oh, yeah.
And you said, that the reason you've been able to do so much and create all of these different visions in your lifetime has been because you've formulated yourself with other people. So you kind of joined with others, the gifts come together in different ways, there's synergy and things grow from there. So I'm just kind of curious to talk to you about that, as formulation is like a model for community and collaboration, especially in the herbal world as people.
Yeah, that's so good. The book is a great example of that, right? Because like I said, it was a formula. It was a creation, not just of mine. It was, selecting the right people, and then everything fell into place beautifully. I think it probably is a natural gift that I have, because as much as I love people, as much as I love plants, I really love people. So I think from the very beginning, like bringing people together was always part of my mission, at the early conferences, and then through the herb schools and the plant lovers journeys and stuff. And I think it was after really studying formulation with William Lassassier's, where I learned that triangular method, that I really saw that really you got so much done, of course, if you brought the right people together. The wrong formula people, not much happens. And I want to just tell a quick story of that, if I may.
Please.
But I saw how it didn't work one time when a group of us, who are all leaders of our own organizations and schools. So there was Bran Secunda was on this trip, and he was the founder, and he's the main teacher of the Dance of the Deer Foundation, a shamanic organization. And then a woman named Catherine Osterby, who was the founder of a very popular massage school, myself, who was the founder of the California School of Herbal Studies. So this all happened many, many years ago, but there was about 6 of us on a plane, and we were all flying up to Mount Shasta, up into the mountains to a person's home to do like a weekend ceremony. That's why we had the shaman with us, right? And there was a big snowstorm, and the plane had to land in the little town of Mount Shasta. And here was a group of people who were all point A. They would all be in the formula, like the specific formulas. They're all like leaders. And none of us could make anything happen. We were all like, we all had great ideas, but we had nobody to support those ideas and nobody to move those ideas along. So we just sat there with good ideas about what we should do now that we were stuck in this airport. And it wasn't until the pilot, who would have been like the activator of the group, finally just went and without saying a word to us, went and rented a car and said, get in it. And we all got in the car. And I realized then, like how important it is with groups as well as herbs, that they're formulated in a way where you have your specific, you have your supportive, and then you have the movers that were often sometimes agitators. Like you have like a really good group will have movement in it. Can have all just people who are thinking about what needs to happen or know what needs to happen. It has to have the soothers, the nourishers, the supporters, who often are doing the actual work, like the nurses in the hospital, right? Doctors give the order, the nurses carry them out. And then you have the agitators or the movers or that are carrying things along, right? Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making so much sense. I feel like I had to learn that even just in running my own school and coming from that place of like realizing when I couldn't do it by myself anymore and realizing like, oh, the support that I need and the different gifts that are needed. And now I just look at the school and I'm just amazed that we do what we do, but it really is like so little to do with me. It's really because of all of the other people behind the scenes working hard. Yeah. With all of their own gifts, like I just look at their gifts. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And also, you made me think of like when you said agitator, I did think of like Michael Tierra and Cascade, and they were they are and were agitators in their own ways that got things done. That
definitely got things done and got things moving. Yes, very, very important. Actually, things get stagnant without those energy movers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's true that with herbs they can move around. They can go depending on the formula and what you're trying to do with that formula. Herbs can move around, like, if you're making a formula for morning sickness or motion sickness, ginger might be a 0.1, but usually we're seeing ginger as a 0.3. And this might be different for people because most people, it's a little more difficult to change places. When you have somebody that's used to being a specific, it's often hard for them to move to a support role. I mean, they can, but they have to put their ego aside, right? The support is ever in the leadership role.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. I think I'm going to think about that a lot. People formulation. It was really eye-opening to me too, because it kind of was like this, like pulling back the curtain a little bit. I'm just like, oh, this is how Rosemary has done so much of what you've done. And, and I can see it woven through. I mean, when you talk about the generosity of plants being like this, your Firesider book was very much like that too. A compilation of and that whole Firesider controversy was also a collaboration of people coming together and working on it. So yeah, I really like that. And actually, that just now makes me think of, I think this might be the first quote in the book. Let me find it here. So beautiful. I sincerely believe the word relationship is the key to the prospect of a decent world, by Clarence Francis, which is a quote from your grandmother's brown book. And so I like that relationship, community, togetherness. Yeah, that's like Rosemary's magic secret sauce right there.
I think that's the greatest gift that the plants offer us. They offer us a way to be in relationship, because all plants are in relationship to everything else, to the earth, the soil, the microbes, to every other plant growing around them. And there is tremendous, I mean, I'm going to use these human words, but they're not really appropriate, but there's tremendous acceptance for everybody in the garden, the wild gardens. It's not like, it's not like they don't have big giveaways or succession, where one plant is overrun by another. We call that overrunning, but in biology, we would call it succession. It's normal. It's a normal process, like my whole generation will be succeeded by another, already are being succeeded by another generation. That's so normal and positive and hopeful, right? And so the plants are just constantly teaching us, like, even when there's, I think about, they teach us not about surviving, about thriving. They trust, like, again, I'm using human language as the plants would not use this language, but, wherever they're seated, everything they need to grow, to not only thrive for themselves, but to grow enough oftentimes to make shade or food or medicine for other members of the community, plant and non-plant. They just do. They just are. Where we whine and complain about where we're planted or what we got when we were born or didn't get, we're like major whiners. It's just amazing to me. I mean, and sometimes appropriately, we're whining appropriately for certain, but I just look at plants and I think about how they find a place in the cement, right? And they grow beautifully. Or I watch mullein thriving on the rocky soil along railroad tracks. There's no soil there, it's rocks. And yet that plant grows 6 feet tall, puts out beautiful soft leaves that will heal our bronchioles, puts out its roots that heals the earth and starts to bring minerals and soil to its little place, puts out flowers that hundreds of different insects come and pollinate, seeds that feed the birds through the winter. Incredible toilet paper for the camper, right? Biodegradable.
That is a generous plant that keeps on giving. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much about relationship, and I think that's helped me more than anything. It's just observing how the plants are in relationship together and with us, together, not just with their own species, but with all species on the planet. It's quite remarkable.
It is quite remarkable. I would say that's one of my most favorite things about herbalism, really, is that realization and the observation and the realization on so many different levels too, of just the beauty in that and the complexity in that, and then the feeling that we are a part of that as well. It's not just outside of us, or that we get to be a part of all of that reciprocity and relationship as well.
Yeah, amen to that.
I have a couple more questions for you, Rosemary. These are kind of like personal questions, so just indulge me. So I have 2 heroines in my life. That is Tori Amos and you. And I've had the pleasure of spending time with you and spending time with Tori Amos. And when I first met Tori and spent time with her, I was like, wow, she reminds me so much of Rosemary. And that was the feeling I took away. That's what I told so many people. And when I tell people what it's like to meet Tori, oftentimes people know you. And so I say, oh, it's like you're when you're with Rosemary. And so I think of you as being so similar in such different ways. She's a very ethereal force, but she's very grounded. She loves the fairies. She creates this sacred space for people to just, feel things through her music. And I feel like you do the same things with plants. Like, you're not just teaching herbalism or just like this remedy for that. You really hold the space for transformation, and really for people to come home to themselves. I feel like that's part of what that teaching is. And you're both really fiery, generous spirits. And you both haven't waited for permission to do things differently. Like, you just gone for it. So yeah, and then you have both do this wonderful co-creation as well. So do you know Tori? Music, not personally, probably, but
yeah, no, I don't know her personally. I know her music, and I'm honored. I can't tell you how honored I am. Really, it's like amazing that you would say those incredible things.
Oh, well, I'm thrilled that you kind of know her music. I was thinking it would be really fun, Rosemary, to have like a listening party. We could get together and just listen to Tori, and that would be like all of my dreams come true in one day. So
let's do it.
All right, awesome.
I'm up for it. Absolutely.
All right, so that was my first question. Could I have a listening party? Thank you for that. Another personal question I have is something that I kind of grapple with a lot, and that is that I feel like both of us, we love our gardens, we love our place, we love connection, we love home. And yet we also have this desire and urge to travel and to see the plants that are far beyond our doorsteps. And I'm just curious what it's like for you to kind of hold both of those loves, to be both rooted and to also be called outward into the greater world. And just if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, I know we're very similar in that way, aren't we? Yeah, I mean, there's so much about people in all of us that are dual, that
Mm.
love home or love to travel or love this or love. So it's learning to be at peace with it and find balance, which I can't say even at this point in my life I found at all. So I'm always torn, right? So like whenever I'm getting ready, there's always a process of packing, usually last minute, gathering all the stuff. I'm always like, why am I doing this? Why am I leaving my beautiful home, my wonderful husband, my cats, my plants, all that.
Exactly.
And then along with that goes, oh my God, there's piles of stuff I haven't gotten done, and they're going to be bigger piles when I get back. And so the stress of that. So I learned that's just how it is. Even if I start packing, a week ahead of time, it's always going to be this feeling of anxiety. And then when I walk out the door and I'm realigned to wherever direction I'm going in, I'm as happy as a lark. And I almost forget about home and my husband and the cats. So I think I've observed myself over the last 50 years kind of with this pattern. It's, you know, have I tried to change it a little bit? Like Cascade used to say to me, put your suitcase out in the room a week before, a month before, and just start putting things in it. And I do that now. Usually start packing up a week or so ahead, but it still doesn't relieve the last minute stress. So I've just come to accept that this is my pattern. I think again, I was talking about that earlier. One of the gifts about getting older is you just get softened about a lot of things, and so this is one of those. I know that I'm always going to be a little anxious to leave home. It's not about safety of going into the world at all. It's just about everything that has to be taken care of, and also leaving home that I love so much, like you were saying. But I also know I love the adventure and the challenge and the opportunity to see and meet new people and new plants. And I'm not going to let that go either. So yeah, I just find a place to just hold both. I let myself be a little stressed. I let myself be a little sad. And then I turn direction and it's like, oh boy, I'm on my way.
Wow, that just so absolutely sums up my experience with that too. I feel all of that, like the sadness of leaving, the stress of leaving, and then once it's like my feet hit the road, I'm kind of like in a new direction and
Yeah.
able to let a lot of it go. Thank you for that. I like the just accepting of the duality. I think maybe that's where I struggle a little bit, is just the pull and tug and feeling like it should be one or the other. So I like that. And then I think in the end, I'm just going to say if it works for Rosemary, then it's going to work for me. So just like I'm getting a permission slip from you.
I mean, I don't know how, when you have both of those in, I don't know that you can change either of that. You either want to leave home because you're not happy there, which is, that should never be the case, or you don't want to go into the world because you don't feel safe there. So, so I think just both are great gifts, that to love your home so much that you don't want to leave, and to love the world so much that you always want to experience it. So just holding both of those together, and just like, they kind of are beautiful. Both.
I really had never thought of it like that in terms of those two gifts. And that is a beautiful way. Cause yeah, I never want to be excited to leave home. Like you said, I love my husband, love the cats, love the plants, love the garden. So yeah, that's not the goal, but I feel so alive when I'm traveling, and it's just such a beautiful world out there that it's hard to give that up. Yeah.
Both
All right.
so
Thank you for this therapy session. I really appreciate it. Before you go, Rosemary, I have one last question for you. And it comes from our mutual friend, Jim McDonald. I was chatting with him, telling him that I was so excited to interview you. And I said, what would you ask Rosemary? And he said something very beautiful and eloquent that I'm going to paraphrase. So this is not in Jim's words. I feel like that's just important to say, because Jim is more eloquent and a powerful speaker than I am. But just to paraphrase, he was talking about, there's no one best herb and there's no one best herbalist, but he was wondering and wanting to hear from you, what are some qualities that you most admire amongst the herbalists that you love?
Wow, leave it to Jim. Okay. So I would say kindness. I admire kindness in everybody, and character, which character can come in any form. It can be rough and tumbled, and I love characters. And that's one of the things I see in most herbalists that I know. When they just allow themselves to be who they are, they're such incredible characters. Interesting. By character, I mean they're just interesting people, because they're uniquely who they are. So I like that as well. And of course, people who spend a lot of time with the plants, they emulate the qualities of the plants, this acceptance and this healing modalities, just the ability to heal by being, not even by necessarily thinking that you're doing anything, just by being. So the plants just have that naturally. And when people spend a lot of time with plants, they seem to emulate that as well. Yeah, I would just say that, I love those herbalists who are just allow themselves to be who they are, the great characters that they are, who are willing to bring out kindness in themselves and others. I think that maybe I admire kindness and thoughtfulness and respectful listening right now because it's needed so much. We need it very, very much right now. Yeah, I have to think about that a little more, but I would say that's it. Yeah, that seems to work.
Yeah, that's
What
beautiful,
do you
Rosemary.
admire, Rosalee? What do you admire
Oh,
most?
well, I wasn't expecting that. Well, the kindness really strikes me, and I was going to say, I think Jim would say that too, if I can just speak for him. The kindness is such an important part of, like, we need that in the world today, but also just that's how we move forward, I think. So in all things, is that collaboration together and the kindness
Yeah.
together. So that's really important. You said too, like how we, as herbalists emulate the plants. I feel like the herbalists that have most profoundly affected me are the ones who are really connected to the plants.
Yeah.
I've studied with some people who are brilliant clinicians that are kind of like pharmacists almost in a way. Like they don't
Yeah.
really have the connection to the plants themselves, and they're brilliant and wonderful. And, I have no
Yeah.
problem with that. The ones who kind of keep resonating with me are the ones who have that connection with the plants themselves. And as you've talked about today, like the whole ecosystem and that whole, that we're a part of the whole. I feel like that's kind of this invisible, well, is invisible the right word? It's almost like this perceived wound that we have, this disconnection from nature. And I feel like so much of what my life's work has been is how to like restitch that back together, while knowing it was never really broken anyway. But it's kind of an interesting, but in our minds, if it has been broken, it can be a difficult thing to kind of stitch back layer by layer by layer. So anybody along the way who's helped me to see things in that way and do some of that restitching has been really powerful. And like you, I like the fiery ones, Cascade. I knew her so briefly, but she affected me so strongly, because she did stand in her power. And so I really appreciate that as well. Yeah.
She impacted everyone, even if they only knew her in one class. She had an aura that just went out. She lived a short life, unfortunately, but in that life, she lived grandly. And, and she's just left such a legacy. So, yeah.
This has been so lovely to spend some time with you, Rosemary. I'm just so grateful for all you put out into the world. Grateful every moment I get to spend with you. Really grateful for the generosity of plants. I'm so excited for folks to get this and experience all the joy and the beauty and the softening in it as well. And after we stop recording, I'm going to get down dates so we can do the Tori listening party. So. And just so much gratitude. Thank you so much, Rosemary, for being here and for sharing with us.
Yeah, we're such sisters on the path. I so appreciate you and all that you do in the world. And thank you. I do want to just say I was so worried when I sent this book out into the world because people are so used to my books being so full of information. I'm thinking, whatever are they going to think? So your positivity has just really filled my heart. I really want to thank you for that.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. And it's a book that I will keep picking up over and over again, a book I'll be gifting and a book I'll be discussing with others too. So
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. We don't have a recipe card for you this week, but I do highly recommend that you pick up your very own copy of The Generosity of Plants, Shared Wisdom from the Community of Herb Lovers, gathered by Rosemary Gladstar. You can find more about Rosemary and her school at her website, scienceandartofherbalism.com. If you'd like more herbal episodes to come your way, then one of the best ways to support this podcast is by subscribing on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Emily Thomas Anderson is the project manager who oversees the entire podcast operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes and on and on. I often tell people, I just show up. Emily does most of the heavy lifting. Nicole Paul is the operator for the entire Herbs with Rosalee school and community. She keeps an eagle-eye view on everything to ensure it's running smoothly. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusakova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them, and I know you love them. Once the illustration is ready, Jenny creates the recipe cards as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our behind-the-scenes tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. If you've written in with a question, undoubtedly you got help from them. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. Thank you so much for your support through your comments, reviews, and ratings. One of my favorite things about this podcast is hearing from you. I read every comment that comes in, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Okay, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you get a gold star and this herbal tidbit. Well, this interview I thought flowed beautifully, thanks in large part to Rosemary's radiant spirit. There is one question, though, that I just didn't fit in, and I've been kicking myself about it ever since. And that question was simply, what brings you joy and hope in the herbal community right now? So after we stopped recording and we were chatting off air, I told her that I'd missed that question, and she immediately lit up and she just started sharing her answer. Like I said, we were off air. I wish I'd captured that moment for you, but since I didn't, I'll try to paraphrase it here. What she said, what gives Rosemary hope, is the younger generations. She sees them leading the way with deep plant spirit connection and fierce love for this earth. And she spoke with so much reverence and excitement. It was really moving. But I will just have to let you imagine the rest of that in her voice. To close out this herbal tidbit, I love to share a couple of quotes from her beautiful new book, The Generosity of Plants. You can find this wherever books are sold, and I highly recommend getting this book for yourself and for your herbal friends. All right, the first quote comes from Guido Mazet. We live in a connected world, not connected by the threads of modern human-to-human telecommunication, but by our interactions with the plants, animals, mushrooms, microbes, soil and stone, water, air, fire, and light, with whom we share the biosphere. And next one, by Bruce Perry. Intuition is not something mystical. It is within us all if we can build a relationship with our physical body, our spiritual edges, and our inner realms. Meeting the plants in this way is enriching, a tonic for our times in which we seem so disconnected from our feelings and environment. And the last quote, by Cascade Anderson Geller. No matter what the shenanigans of her human children, our Mother Earth remains a generous spirit. Thanks for listening in. I'll see you next time. Hi, it's Rosalee. If this podcast has brought you inspiration or grounded you in your love of herbs, I'd love to invite you to join the podcast circle. Your membership helps support the show, and it gives you access to live herbal classes, exclusive resources, and a warm community of fellow plant lovers. Learn more and join us at herbalpodcastcircle.com. Your support truly helps this podcast thrive. Thank you.